Welcome to Winter Grace Senior Ministries. We have a mission at Winter Grace to empower and enrich the lives of older adults. And one of the ways that we are trying to do that is inviting experts in fields who can make that happen to be with us. Today, we are excited to have Dr. Lynn Shoemake, a pharmacist, natural products and herbal medicine specialist, and Brian Miller, nutritional product specialist and senior fitness specialist with us. Dr. Shoemake and Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We do have Dr. Shoemake's bio and PDF on our site just below where this video is. And we are just really excited to have you both here and share about improving our immunity naturally. So gentlemen,
good to be here. Thank you. Lynn, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right.
So gentlemen, please introduce yourselves.
Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Miller with enutritionstore.com. We are an online nutritional supplements, botanical products, and natural medicines company that basically offers and sells products through our store online. This is close to my 30th year in the nutritional products industry. I have a background in health science as far as my education, concentration on health education. And I also have several certifications, including senior fitness, sports nutrition, strength and conditioning, personal training. So basically what I do is I help folks of all ages and all interest in all health goals evaluate their diet to some extent, and also help them look at, evaluate, and determine what nutritional supplement products may be best for them to use to achieve their health goals.
Thanks,
Lynn,
Brian.
it's all yours.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Shoemake. I'm a clinical pharmacist, which means that I work directly with patients regarding their health conditions. We look at nutrition. We look at their health history, any disease states that they've had, conditions both past and present. I have a certification as a personal trainer, but also in sports nutrition with a focus on concussion treatment. I work with patients from pediatrics to senior health. We generally do a consultation and look at not only diet and digestion, but we also look at the interaction with supplements, prescription items, their diet. We look at energy patterns, sleep patterns, emotional patterns. And after that, we can make some recommendations as to how they can make some changes for improvement. So I'm looking forward to specifically discussing immune health at this time. We're stepping into the fall. This is an excellent time to work on building up our immune system. Thanks, Brian.
So we are going to be talking about the basics of health and nutrition and immune health. Brian, are you going to want to lead us off here?
Yeah, I'm just going to want to bring up a couple of slides just to kind of set the discussion up here. Where we'd like to go with what we're going to talk about in regards to health and how it in relation to your immune health as well. A couple of quick things to think about to kind of set up our discussion as we go forward. And one way to look at it is, if you can see my title down there, somebody needs to do something about the potholes. Now, I'd like you to think in terms of, if you were an automobile and the environment, the situations, the things that affect us would be the road. The better our automobile is, as far as the shape it's in, the better it's going to be able to deal with things along the road, like the potholes. So we're going to be moving forward in discussion about what you can do to basically get your health and your immune system closer to something like this, which is going to be able to handle the rough terrain out there a lot better than something in that kind of shape. So I just wanted to kind of set the table with that and get everybody's thought processes wrapped around that. So what we're going to be talking about is a little bit in regards to diet. There's always a lot of questions about, you know, what types of nutritional products should I take? What types of natural medicines? And we're awash in these products, you know, through commercials on TV and radio and obviously the internet. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of good information, but there's also a lot of misinformation, and there's just a lot of bad information. And I think Dr. Shoemake will agree with me. One of the things we see the most of is, quite frankly, just people wasting money on stuff that is not necessarily going to help them achieve the health goals that we have. And at this moment, obviously, people's health goals are really focused around how can I stay healthy, avoid getting sick, avoid getting infected, and God forbid, avoid having to deal with this coronavirus. And if you should happen to find yourself in that situation, hopefully your personal health status, you know, your vehicle, your immune system will be as optimized as possible to deal with it better and recover and get back to a healthy state. So with that said, I just kind of wanted to kick off our discussion in the direction of we've been hearing a lot about the cytokine storm in regards to the medical community educating us on the COVID situation. Well, the cytokine storm is basically just our body's inflammatory response to any type of infection, but in particular this COVID virus, which we've been dealing with. It's been shown to release a massive cytokine storm and create inflammatory problems, in particular in the lungs, but other parts of the body as well. So we're going to talk about, if that's the situation, we want to put our body in a state to where and prep it for the fact, well, if we're going to be subjected to an inflammatory response, let's make that as healthy and as least harmful as possible to ourselves. Lynn, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Well, just a caveat that all diseases are driven by inflammation. And so once a disease state is initiated, the driving force behind that is inflammation. And that's our body's natural way of responding to it. It helps to activate the immune system. It bumps up a lot of biological factors that help to attack a particular disease or try to repair a damaged organ. But at some point, that inflammation may go off the rails and become more detrimental, and particularly in chronic disease states, inflammation is more detrimental and tends to be rather insidious in the sense that we don't always recognize the inflammation. The outward signs are swelling and heat and oftentimes pain and discomfort. But inflammation also drives our stress hormones, which raise blood pressure, cholesterol levels, also significantly affects brain function. And so it alters our behavior, our attitudes, and our perceptions, and significantly affects our sleep cycles, making for shorter and more shallow sleep. So we're less rested, which then contributes back again to driving our stress hormones. So inflammation, though it's an important factor initially, long-term, it really can be detrimental.
Yeah, so basically what we're talking about is, excuse me, a balancing act that the body does. We need inflammation to fight infections, to help clean up areas where we have damaged cells. A classic example of that is if you sprain your ankle, it tends to blow up and get bruised and all that ugliness that goes on in the tissue. That all has to be digested, and that's basically what recovery is. And the immune system participates in that, as long as some other systems. But that is an acute inflammatory response. And that is good. Now, if that persists too long, then it becomes problematic in regards to, one, pain, and then the fact that it's going to be damaging to the tissues to completely be subjected to that inflammation over a long period of time. So we want a nice, healthy inflammatory response. But as Dr. Shoemake mentioned, when this becomes chronic, this chronic inflammation is basically underlies a lot of our disease states, heart disease, cancers, just about any chronic disease state, there is an underlying inflammatory process going on. So what we want to segue into is, so how do we be less inflamed and more deflamed, to borrow a term from a friend of mine who does a lot of writing on this. If we can kind of picture a glass of water, and if that glass of water is filled to the top and it gets nudged, it's going to spill water. If that glass of water, if you picture that water as inflammation filled to the top, and even though it may not be causing any acute pain at that moment, any insult or nudge will spill that inflammation out of the glass and basically into the body and start creating problems. So what's our goal is to lower that glass of water, that glass of inflammation. So if we knock that glass and it almost falls over, but corrects itself and lands straight up, we didn't spill any water. So that's just another way to kind of look how inflammation works. So with that said, I'd like to introduce just a couple of minutes discussion on how diet plays into this. And we now know that our diet can drive inflammation on a very low level or a very high level. So I think these are important facts to consider, especially with the COVID situation and as we move into the quote unquote cold and flu season. We want to look at how we can change our eating habits, our other lifestyle habits to minimize the level of inflammation our body is producing. So when we have a problem, it will respond, have a much more healthy response to that.
So are we saying like we want our immune system to be strong and healthy and responsive, and somehow that can interacts with how inflamed we are? Or is our immune response when we're already inflamed is what might push us over the edge?
Yeah, it's a direct correlation, and something we've been battling, and this is all over the media and health information, health news. You hear this term, we need to boost our immune systems. Well, if you're healthy, there's no need to boost your immune system. A boosted immune system is an immune system that's activated. When you do get an infection or some other type of injury, then we want to see the boosting of the immune system to handle that. But to boost an immune system that's perfectly healthy is not a healthy objective to obtain. So again, back to that balance, we want a healthy immune system that's ready to go. So just like our pickup truck on the rocks there, it's ready to take on the terrain and just kind of ride over it. Will the wheels be bouncing up and down? Yeah, but that's part of handling the terrain. But that truck is designed to do that. it's got the shock absorbers to do that.
So Brian, are you suggesting that diet has an effect on our inflammatory process?
Yeah, so we know there are certain types of foods that drive and promote inflammation. So what do these foods boil down to? Basically, very simply, consumption of too much sugar and the consumption of too many grain products will drive inflammation. That's the simplest rule of thumb. So if your diet consists of large amounts and large servings of bread, pasta, other grain produced products, and their heavy sugar intake, sodas, alcohol, candy, obviously, those foods, too much of that is going to put you in a pro-inflammatory state. Whereas if we're going to eat foods that are anti-inflammatory, healthier carbohydrates, things that are low in sugar, then we're looking at things like fruits and vegetables and lean meats. It really is as simple as that in regards to adjusting your diet to be more healthy and less inflammatory.
But doesn't the food pyramid show breads and grains as being a major part of a diet?
Yeah, let me share my screen again with you, and let's take a look at that. So this is what we've all been taught for years, the classic food pyramid. And if you can't read that, the foundation of our diet, according to this information, would be 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta per day. I really can't see how anybody can get away with this without experience some sort of elevation in their blood sugar and driving them to a pre-diabetic state. So consuming this amount of these types of foods is pro-inflammatory. So if you look at the second level there, which should be the first level, fruits and vegetables, which are very healthy, provide excellent fiber, very nutrient dense. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals in these types of foods. This is what should be dominating our diet. And then we always need to add protein into that as well. Lean meats, poultry, fish, raw healthy nuts, eggs, beans, some dairy is perfectly fine, but these things are very anti-inflammatory. And Lynn, if you just want to touch on a minute about as far as how healthy they are for our digestive tract.
Absolutely. I'm looking at your fruits and vegetables. They're obviously our source for all of our multivitamins that we're in need of. But nature's given us vitamins that are also antioxidants. And one of the physiological effects of inflammation is that it creates free radicals. And these are molecules that zip around like laser shots, and they literally punch holes in our tissues and our organs. And so they do damage over time, and they weaken those tissues. Antioxidants from the vegetables and fruits help to neutralize those free radicals and reduces their damage, and over time helps to improve the healing process and repair. So that's a really important area. Not suggesting that everyone needs to be a vegetarian. They can certainly have a mixed diet, but they need to favor their fruits and vegetables. And then add back quality meats, perhaps a little bit of dairy. The other piece that's missing from that particular slide is the omega oils, Brian, which I'm sure you'll talk about.
Yeah, and I'd really like to point out while we're on this slide, obviously because of the COVID situation, and it is a airborne respiratory virus for what we know at this point, we're not hearing much about probably the biggest immune aspect of our bodies as far as protection that we have above and beyond our respiratory tracts, and that is our digestive tracts. Because this is where we take in food, and obviously we digest it. But that the lining of the gastrointestinal tract is the largest immune barrier we have to keep invaders coming into our body and creating problems such as infections and other problems. So that's why you're seeing the little bugs up in the corner. We're a team. Our digestive tract is basically very simplistic explanation, full of bugs. And we want to have the good bugs dominating that environment to deal with the bad bugs. And when we eat a diet that is focused on these types of foods, that creates a very fertile environment for the bad bugs to grow in. And when we eat these types of foods, they support our good bugs. And we now know that those good bugs have a direct relationship on the rest of our body, and in particular our immune system. So if we are not maintaining good diet, thus a good healthy digestive tract, we are creating a greater risk environment for our immune system and infection and recovery going forward. And this all plays into that is a pro-inflammatory situation in unto itself. And we see this manifested in more serious diseases such as Crohn's disease and IBS and GERD and things like that.
This category too, Brian, as you mentioned, provides a fair amount of fiber. And fiber is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it acts like little sponges to sort of scrub out the intestines and remove our waste material. It also breaks down into food for the good bacterium. That's what they eat. And sugar tends to be a reverse there. It tends to nullify the immune system and tends to weaken it over time. So favoring the vegetables not only give you vitamins and minerals that we need, but also it helps to feed our immune components. Most important.
Yeah, so now that we've covered, the diet, and we just like to leave you with this, eat more fruits and vegetables, eat less of the grains, pastas, and breads. I mean, I enjoy eating those foods, but I try to minimize those, especially coming into this time of year. Eat your lean meats and healthy meats, cuts of meat. And I think that's just a great simplistic foundation as far as, how to improve your diet and thus improve your immune system and be able to deal more with infection. So with that said, Deb, we'd kind of like to segue into, next part of our discussion, the nutritional supplement products, the botanicals, the herbals, the different things out there that are being offered and marketed and discussed. Both Dr. Lynn and I always like to start from, the conservative aspect of this, the foundation. And this basically boils down to, okay, what's a great place to start? And a great place to start is, well, even if we eat very well, what do we tend to not have enough of in our diets, whether that's, your lifestyle, the amount of time you have to eat. It could be poor choices, which hopefully you'll be improving those. But any number of factors, there's nobody that I've ever met that had the perfect diet. And as much as I try to, I don't even come close, quite frankly, because life gets in the way. So nutritional supplement products and some of these other things can really be helpful in adding into the diet. And then there's also factors, especially as we come into this time of year, ours in particular, our fruits and vegetables just don't have the nutrients that they do when they're grown in season. And due to basically food being an international thing these days as well, food's picked from all over different parts of the world, often before it's ripened. It's shipped to where we are, and by the time we get it, it may not be ripe. So we're not getting the full benefits of these food products in regards to what we call their nutrient density or their nutrient value.
And also, I mean, we have soil. The soil is so depleted from the nutrients that it used to have in it. We're concerned about chemicals and applied, and so the fruits themselves, even when they're first picked, they're not as nutrient dense and safe as they were maybe 50 years ago.
Oh, most definitely. That's why fertilizers are used to remineralize our soil. So these are some of the things we're just up against. And if you can live out on your own farm and rotate your crops and be as organic as possible, that's great. But for the most of us,
that's not happening.
We're just not in that situation. So my first main recommendation is a good high quality multivitamin. That way you're getting a little bit of everything. And it's kind of, you could look at it as a shotgun approach, but you're getting a little bit of everything that may be missing in your diet. So that's an easy one. And multivitamins are not that expensive. I just recommend getting a good high quality one that's actually going to contain the nutrients that it says is on the bottle or the box, and it actually is digested, because there are some issues with that. The other foundational nutrients that we recommend, 3 of them. And you just keep these 3 in mind. And that's because these have been found through good scientific research to be the most efficient in our diets. And the deficiency of these also promote inflammation. And those would be the omega-3 fatty acids, which more commonly known where we get them from would be our fish oil supplements. Number 2 would be magnesium. Magnesium is involved in a lot of our body functions, and is also anti-inflammatory. And the third one, which I'm going to discuss in a little more detail in a minute here, would be vitamin D, because we've been hearing so much about that in relation to this COVID situation and the therapies and treatments that have been discussed and published and whatnot. So fish oil, omega-3 fatty acid, magnesium, extra magnesium in your diet, and vitamin D. Lynn, did you want to make a comment on any of those?
Well, I'll wait till you put up some slides and then we'll chat.
I do have a question. I know you've already mentioned about you have to make sure what your supplements you're using have what they say is in them, but also you want to be aware of what else they have in them that you probably don't want in your supplements too. Any fillers or other ingredients, unhealthful and fillers would not be good to have in your supplements either.
Yeah, we'll address that as we kind of wrap up the supplement discussion. But I just wanted to let's jump on vitamin D, because that seems to be top of mind, and it kind of plays right into the diet discussion that we just had. And I think this is an important concept. It's a vital concept for people to understand. So at the bottom, that is just a chart that is basically showing vitamin D, measured vitamin D levels in the study population in relation to the time of year. And if you look all the way to your left, we're starting in September. So quite frankly, the period we're into October now, but right now we are in real time at the left of this chart. And as you'll notice, from September to October to November to December to January to February, vitamin D levels drop significantly. And this is directly related to sun exposure because the primary source of our body generating vitamin D is sun exposure. And as you'll see, February and March and April and May and June and July, August, and then back to September, it peaks again in September. So we are now into the declining vitamin D level in our body until we get into February and then climb back out of it. Now keep in mind, this is if you're getting average sun exposure, which many people these days aren't due to avoidance of sun exposure, or they just don't have the opportunity to get outside that much. So we are in a naturally occurring vitamin D deficiency conundrum here. And this is very pro-inflammatory and also affects us in other ways as well, which we'll discuss in a minute. At the top, you're probably wondering, well, what is going on up there? Well, if you also think back to the discussion we just had about the types of foods that you eat that can drive inflammation, I've just put together this in direct relationship to the declining sun exposure season. But when do we tend to start into feasting and overeating and partying and having a good time? And quite frankly, nothing wrong with having a good time, but this can tend to lead to overdoing it and not maintaining a healthy diet. So right around this time of year, we'll be coming up on Halloween, which is directly associated with large amount of candy and sugar consumption. We'll be rolling right into Thanksgiving, which is a feasting festival, which often involves drink and overeating. Then we're into the spiritual holidays of Christmas or Hanukkah, which also involves the consumption of alcohol and feasting and tends to put us in a situation of overdoing it. And to finish off into mid-February, we have the American holiday of the Super Bowl, which also involves alcohol consumption and feasting and can often involve overdoing it. So when you combine these two paradigms, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage, especially in our current situation of dealing with, one, the oncoming influenza season, and the fact that we have no idea what's going to happen with the COVID virus situation going forward. Lynn, any comments to that?
Well, vitamin D is so important today. First discovered in the 1930s and 40s, it was initially associated with rickets in children. And so their recommendation was that you needed to have around 400 IUs, international units, in order to prevent rickets in children. But and then it was classified as a vitamin or a vital amine. But since then, over the last 50 years, we've learned that vitamin D is associated with at least 400 or more enzyme systems within the body. It's extremely important for immune function, but we also recognize it now as a pro-hormone. It's associated with our android hormones, strength and stamina, cognitive functioning, and also it's recognized today as an antiviral. So it's extremely important to keep these levels elevated, and the current standards that are published tend to be on the low side. They've not been adjusted in the last 40 years. And so your next few slides will indicate where we should be from a serum level presentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out on this slide, this was one of the studies done on vitamin D in relation to colds and influenzas. And we now know the higher your vitamin D level is, the less likely are you going to suffer from a respiratory infection. But this just shows populations that did not take vitamin D and populations that did take vitamin D, and the incidence of them catching a cold or influenza after taking 2,000 IUs of vitamin D. And as you'll see in the winter category, which is when we tend to get these infections, the folks that didn't take the vitamin D, their incidence of reporting colds and flu symptoms was much higher than those that were taking vitamin D. Just kind of back to the dietary situation, one of the reasons the vitamin D discussion is so important, especially from the supplement end of things, is it's very hard to get from food. Naturally, we're supposed to derive it from sun exposure. You can check your vitamin D status, I always say, by looking at your holiday pictures, like your Christmas pictures versus your summer vacation pictures. And sometimes it's quite drastic, and you can pretty much pick out, when your deficiency is at its peak. But if you look at where we get it from foods, and this chart basically shows shiitake mushrooms and salmon are great sources. But we start looking at some of these other things, they just contain very little vitamin D. So that's why we have that in our top recommendations of which nutritional products you want to be looking at and taking in regards to improving not only your health, but your immune health in particular. Lynn, I'll kind of let you just talk about, it's always a question of how much should we take, but just tell the folks a little bit about how the medical community establishes that.
Sure. You'll notice in this chart that you have a couple of agencies, the Endocrine Society, the Vitamin D Council, and also the Food and Nutrition Board. They all have somewhat different standards published, but most of these standards were established back in the late 1900s and have not been reviewed or updated. Normally, if you get a blood test done in the physician's office, and they do a blood panel, including vitamin D, they're going to look to see if you have at least 30 nanograms of vitamin D in your serum, and that's considered sufficient. However, it's not optimal from a functional standpoint. Mm-hmm. We really want to move that up, the blood level up closer to 50 to 80 nanograms. And your charts, your next few charts, will demonstrate that as we increase the concentration of our vitamin D levels, we can actually reduce the significance of a number of acute and chronic diseases. You have a chart for that. The Vitamin D Council recommends 1,000 international units for infants and also 1,000 per 25 pounds for children. And that's not a bad target. The 5,000 per day for adults is usually what I prescribe unless patients are significantly deficient, in which case we will double that for a couple of weeks in order to raise their concentration. But a good 5,000 a day should be an adequate level and bring them up beyond 50 nanograms. And the Endocrine Society recommends 1,000 to 2,000. I still think that these are low standards, and you can discuss it with your physicians, but most physicians are not trained in functional medicine. They're trained in Western medicine model, which tends to have lower values. You see the Food and Nutrition Board shows it at 400. That's actually the recommendation to prevent rickets in children, established in the 1940s. It has never been adjusted. And just as a caveat, they never did establish an adult level at that time. And so that's not in the literature. They recommend adding 600 for, the Food and Nutrition Board recommends 600 a day for adults, or for children, excuse me, and again, 600 to 800 for adults. I think those values are too low. And as we are now entering our fall and winter months, and we want to support, not boost, our immune system. I think patients, my recommendation is that they reach for the 5,000 per day level. By the way, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and so that's why we look toward the cold water fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, cod, as having higher levels of vitamin D.
Yeah, so to make it simple, when you get your blood test, and you may have already discussed this with your physician, you're going to get a number for your vitamin D level. And that's basically what this chart shows. Across the top, you see number 6, 8, 10, all the way through up 68. That is showing the number that is produced from a vitamin D test. What we just wanted to briefly point out was this is where very conservative levels of vitamin D are acceptable through most of the medical community, which is around 30, 32. We feel this is actually, you know, I've never wanted to be on the low side of any normal standard. It's kind of like getting a C, you know, on your math test. In conjunction with this, the folks that we're looking at and recommending their recommendations for where your vitamin D number should be, again, that number across the top, at a minimum between 50 and 60. Some of the vitamin D expert groups would like to see that up around 75. But again, don't achieve, you know, try to get a C in your math class, your vitamin D class, try to get more of a B plus or an A. And the reason that we recommend that is if you just look at the overall vitamin D research, and this is why vitamin D is so important, you know, beyond just our immune function. If you look down the left-hand column, these are a collection of studies that they've been doing over the last 20 or so years on cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, diabetes, fractures, falls, multiple sclerosis, heart attack, kidney cancer, endometrial cancer. And basically what this chart shows is the higher our number, you know, the less of these we see in the population state. So to pick one in particular, breast cancer, the higher your vitamin D level in your blood test, the lower your chance of contracting breast cancer. And this is statistically, but this is one of the things that was driving the vitamin D recommendations prior to this COVID situation. Now, with the fact that we know that vitamin D supports our naturally produced antibiotics in our body, even more important to maintain high levels of vitamin D. In regards to that, back to, again, looking at the modern diet and talking about COVID, one of the primary risk factors for contracting COVID and having serious problems is obesity, carrying too much weight. And back to the diet discussion, we've looked at, you know, what the typical American diet consists of, and not to bore you with statistics, but this shows predominantly a consumption of things that are pro-inflammatory. If you look at the very bottom one, less than 10% of fruits and vegetables. So these are very easily turned around as far as eat less of this, eat more of these, and can do wonders for your health and your immune status. And again, back to sugar, we know that sugar directly attacks the immune system. It does not allow the immune system to do what it's supposed to do. So if you have high blood sugar, consuming refined sugars on a regular basis, you are putting yourself at great risk of your immune system not being able to handle COVID-19 or any type of infection and deal with, a challenge to your health system. So before we get into this, I just want to remind you, again, vitamin D, very important. Magnesium, we discussed, has many roles in the body, but it tends to be deficient, and that tends to show up in some simple symptoms in regards to problems with digestion, problems with sleeping, problems with not having relaxed muscles and muscle tightness, stiffness, and cramping. Lynn, did you want to add anything else about magnesium?
Well, magnesium is extremely important for both muscular contraction and relaxation, as well as our nervous system, as well as our brain function. And so in order to get an electrical charge down a nerve tissue, you have a flux of calcium and magnesium. Same thing for any of our muscles. So magnesium deficiency can cause a number of dysfunctions, both physically as well as mentally. Magnesium as a mineral tends to be a wetting agent, whereas calcium as a mineral tends to be a drying agent. So diets that are heavy in calcium, such as cheeses and milks and things of that type, tend to have a more drying or constipating effect on the digestive tract, which weakens the immune system over time. And so adding back more magnesium helps to have the digestive tract work more efficiently, more effectively, and consistently, and the bowels move on a regular basis. Such things as nocturnal leg cramps are treated with magnesium both topically as well as orally. So magnesium tends to be one of those minerals that tend to be more deficient in many diets.
So we've talked about diet, we've talked about the fundamental foundational nutritional supplements, multivitamin, vitamin D, magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil, because they, like magnesium, are important to many aspects of our body, but they are also anti-inflammatory unto themselves. So those would be, the 4 easy ones to include, and would be our first recommendation when buying nutritional supplement products. But I wanted Lynn to talk a little bit more about, because there's a lot of interest, and we've been working with what we call botanicals / herbals, plant ingredients and medicine and spices and all the good stuff that nature gives us out of the garden that can be helpful in incorporating into taking something to improve our health status and also our immune system.
So this particular slide, Brian, demonstrates a number of botanicals that nature has given us that help to support our immune system. The mushrooms include the oriental mushrooms, shiitake, maitake, not the white button mushrooms, they're not as powerful. Elderberry, echinacea, the golden seal, the Oregon grape. Any of those, either individually, my preference is actually combination products, tend to help build the immune system. And as you had commented earlier, we don't need to boost it as much as we need to support it. And so there are a number, these in addition to a number of other botanicals help to sustain the immune system and support it during our fall and winter months. I'd look for a combination product. And then nature's also given us a number of anti-inflammatories. They tend to be in the spice family. Let me also comment that the FDA has now put a black box on aspirin, Tylenol, and ibuprofen. All 3 of those have significant negative effects on us. And so we've tried to move patients toward botanical anti-inflammatories. Turmeric or curcumin is an excellent anti-inflammatory. Ginger, raw ginger, whether it's in capsule form or in food-based, excellent. Boswellia, devil's claw, cat's claw, white willow bark, which was a source of aspirin, but they're entirely different. They work different. And feverfew. Again, I look toward combination products with these herbal constituents in order to get an added boost. So being on these on a regular basis helps to reduce inflammation throughout the body. So whether you have normal aches and pains and discomfort, if you tend to be having issues sleeping at night, restlessness, roll and tumble, kick the covers, it may well be due to low-grade inflammatory conditions that are raising your stress levels and creating more shorter and shallow sleep. By going on botanical anti-inflammatories throughout the day will help to reduce that inflammation, reduce the damage done by the inflammation, create a healing process in those tissues, and create a brighter attitude mentally and functionally and cognitively. So I strongly recommend botanical anti-inflammatories. Thanks, Brian.
So, Debbie, I hope we provided a good basic roadmap for folks as far as, eat better, especially going into the upcoming season of celebration and festivities. Bolster your diet with the basic, most important nutrients, which would be, a multivitamin, omega-3, fish oil, magnesium, and then vitamin D. And even if you're going to only choose one of those, then I would say get your vitamin D level optimized. And then incorporating some of this other stuff, which is great, to add to any diet, but they are natural anti-inflammatories. And again, when we're talking about a situation such as COVID and the cytokine storm, which we know is just a massive inflammatory response, we want to put our body in a position to be able to more quickly and more efficiently deal with that infection. So I hope we provided a good roadmap for everybody, good fundamental basic steps that they can go out and start incorporating into their lifestyle and their diet.
Absolutely.
I make a comment, Brian. The last 6 to 8 months of the pandemic have driven us all back into our caves. We've become cave dwellers. And unfortunately, that means we're not out in the sunshine, we're not exercising, we're not moving as much, and we're sitting more. People have become very sedentary. Consequently, we eat less and drink less. We're dehydrated, and that weakens our immune system even further. So a real short list as we move into the fall and the winter months is 1, hydrate, 2 to 3 liters of fluid a day. Move, get up, walk, do Tai Chi, do yoga, but find some means of moving, not sitting all of the day. And then look at your diet, look at your vitamin D and your mineral content, get yourself on a good quality multivitamin, and add back the omega oils into your diet. That's my caveat.
Thanks, Dr. Shoemake. Thank you, Brian. And also, if we use these anti-inflammatories, maybe if we do have pain in our body, it helps reduce that, which allows us to move more comfortably, which feeds on itself to help us be more stronger and healthier. So it obviously all works together. So we can sleep better.
Exactly.
It's funny how it all works together, isn't it?
Interesting. It's very integrated.
Yes. Dr. Shoemake and Brian, I can't thank you enough for bringing all of your expertise and information to us. And so we're on a mission to empower and enrich lives. And I really believe that when folks listen and take all of your advice, that they will make that happen for them. Your contact information and other information is with this video on the website. People will see it. And I hope you all have a safe, healthy winter season, fall and winter season here.
Thank you.
Be well.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, Debbie.